The Pilgrim in the Empty Land. On the Desert and the Refining of the Soul. A pilgrim returned from a successful pilgrimage. He had walked over many years to every holy place his religion possessed. He had been 27 when he left. He was 42 when he returned. The pilgrimage had been the project of his middle life. He had been raised in a religious household. He had been a serious child. He had become, in his early 20s, a man with a sense that his life was not, in its current shape, what it should be. He had spoken with his teacher. His teacher had suggested the pilgrimage. He had agreed. He had been gone 15 years. He had stood at the great altars. He had drunk from the sacred wells. He had lit the right candles in the right shrines at the right times of the year. He had observed every fast. He had said every prayer his teachers had told him to say. He had walked in those 15 years, perhaps 8,000 miles. He had worn out 7 pairs of sandals. He had crossed 3 deserts, 2 seas, and 1 range of mountains so high that his lungs had ached for a month afterward. He had come home with the proper dust on his sandals and the proper light in his eyes. He had been a good pilgrim. He had completed every act his teachers had told him to complete. He had not, in 15 years, broken any of the disciplines they had set him. He had not lied. He had not stolen. He had not, in 15 years, lain with a woman. He had given alms where he had had alms to give. He had read the scriptures every evening. He had, by every external measure, succeeded. He came around the last bend in the road and saw his village. It was sand. He stopped on the road. He did not, at first, understand what he was seeing. The village had been, when he left, a small village of perhaps 30 houses, built of mud, brick, and timber, on a small river surrounded by fields. He had grown up in the village. He had known every house, every face. He had left his wife in one of the houses with a promise to return. The village was sand. His house, sand. The shape of it remained, the doorway, the window, the small porch where his wife had liked to sit in the evenings, but it was all sand. The mud bricks had become sand. Timber had become sand. The thatch of the roof had become sand. He could put his hand through the doorpost without resistance. It crumbled at his touch. His wife, who he had left 15 years before and who had been waiting for him, sand. She was in the doorway. She was somehow still recognizably her. She had aged. The figure in the doorway was a woman of his own age, with grey in her hair, with the small lines of a woman who had waited. But she was sand. He approached her. He spoke her name. The sand did not respond. He touched her shoulder. The shoulder gave way under his hand. The whole shape of her very slowly settled into a small pile on the threshold. The well in the courtyard, sand. He looked down it. There was no water. There had been water when he had left. The well had been deep and clear and had given them their drinking water. It was now a shaft full of sand to its brim. The bread on the table, sand. He went inside, by the doorway that no longer had a door. The table was still in the kitchen. There was a loaf on it. The loaf, when he picked it up, was sand. It came apart in his hands. The fire in the hearth, cold sand. There were small embers, sand-colored, that had not glowed in a long time. He stood in his courtyard for a long time. He could not weep. He had no water left. He had walked in the last 3 days of the pilgrimage through a small desert. He had not drunk water in some hours. His mouth was dry. His eyes had no moisture in them. He sat down at last on the sand that had been the bench by his door. It supported him. The sand had retained, somehow, the shape of the bench and held his weight. He sat. He looked at the small pile that had been his wife. He spoke. "My soul," he said, "where are you? Do you hear me? I speak, I call you. Are you there?" The sand did not answer. He sat for a day. He sat for a second day. He did not move. He did not eat. He had nothing to eat. He did not pray. He had used up all his prayers on the pilgrimage. He had said in 15 years, perhaps 1,000,000 prayers, and they had taken him to every holy place and had brought him home to a village of sand. He had no prayers left. He simply sat and called every few hours into the silence. "My soul, where are you?" The sand did not answer. He did not sleep. He sat through the nights, through the days. He grew weaker. He did not in those days drink anything. He did not eat anything. He did not move except to sit. His skin began, by the end of the 2nd day, to crack at the lips. On the morning of the 3rd day, a small green shoot pushed up through the sand between his fingers. He had not noticed his fingers in some hours. He had been sitting with his hands flat on the sand of the bench, palms down, fingers slightly spread. The shoot came up between the first and second fingers of his right hand. It was the color of wet leaves. It was the only color he had seen in 2 days. The color was, somehow, more intense than. Color ought to be a green that was not only green, but the principle of green, the first green, the green that all other greens were attempting. He did not pluck it. He did not move his hand. He understood in some place older than thought that he was not to pluck it. He was not to question it. He was not to be grateful for it, and he was not to be relieved. He was only to let it grow. It was a difficult thing. He had been in his life a man who acted on what he saw. He had walked 8,000 miles in response to a feeling. He had spent 15 years completing the acts his teachers had set him. He was, by training and by inclination, a man who did things. He had not, in 15 years, been still in front of a green thing for longer than the duration of a prayer. He let the shoot grow. He moved his hand very slowly so as not to disturb it. He lifted his hand eventually from the sand. The shoot continued to grow. He watched it. He continued to sit on the bench. He continued not to drink, not to eat. The shoot continued. By the end of the 3rd day, the shoot was a small plant. By the end of the 3rd week, it was the height of his knee. By the end of the 3rd month, it was the height of his head. The shoot was, by then, a tree. The well, by the 3rd month, had water in it. He had not done anything to the well. The well, somehow, in response to the shoot, had been filling. By the 4th month, when he lowered the bucket, which had also somehow returned to being a bucket, with wood instead of sand in its sides, the bucket came up full. The fire in the hearth lit itself in the 4th month. He had been sitting by the cold sand of the hearth one evening in the 3rd month, and the small embers had begun, very faintly, to glow. By the 4th month, the fire was a fire. The woman in the doorway became a woman again in the 5th month. This was the slowest of the returns. The small pile that had been his wife on the first day had remained for many weeks. Small pile, it had begun in the 4th month to take on, very gradually, the shape of a sitting woman. By the 5th, the shape had become solid. He could touch it without it collapsing. By the 6th, the woman had eyes. By the 7th, she had a voice. By the end of the 1st year, she was, in every visible respect, his wife, 15 years older than he had left her, with the grey in her hair, with the small lines of a woman who had waited. He sat with her on the small bench in the evenings. She did not, in those first months, speak about what had happened. She did not, in any month of the 1st year, ask him about the pilgrimage. She did not, in any year afterward, ask him about it. He understood why. None of these returns had occurred because he had asked. They had not occurred because he had prayed. They had not occurred because of any of the 8,000 miles, or the 7 pairs of sandals, or the sacred wells he had drunk from. They had occurred because he had sat for 3 days in the sand without water, without food, without prayer, and had not asked, and had not plucked the shoot. He went on no more pilgrimages. He lived in the village for the rest of his life. He drew water from the well. He cooked his bread. He sat in the evenings with his wife on the small bench. He had not, in 15 years of pilgrimage, lain with a woman. He lay with his wife now, in the way he had at 27, before the pilgrimage. They had a child in the 2nd year, a daughter, who was the joy of his middle age. He died at 71 in the small house, with his wife and his daughter beside him. The village, after his return, became famous in the region for being a village in which there was a pilgrim who had stopped pilgrimaging. Younger men, restless in their religious houses, sometimes came to ask him what he had learned. He always said the same thing. He said, "I learned that the soul does not come when she is called." The younger men, on the whole, did not understand. They went away. They went on their own pilgrimages, most of them. In time came back. Some of them, when they came back, found their villages also of sand. Most did not. The lesson was, by its nature, hard to inherit. It had to be learned in one's own sand, on one's own bench, by sitting for 3 days with nothing. The small tree in the courtyard is, in some province, still there. It is, by now, very old. It has not, in any year, been plucked. The soul does not come when you call. She comes when you have called for 3 days, and Stopped and have nothing left, and sit and do not. Pluck what at last grows between your fingers. The village of sand is the return from the pilgrimage. The pilgrimage was the wrong question. The sitting on the bench in the sand is the right one. The shoot will come, do not pluck it. The tree will grow, the well will fill, the wife will return. None of this is because you asked, it is because you sat.